So a couple weeks ago, I was going over my backlog of games to try and complete some of them, and I came across Call of Juarez Gunslinger, a single-player, story-driven game about a gunslinger cowboy dueling it out with adversaries, all with a stylish art style and satisfying gameplay. And I liked it a lot. It was all fun and games until I got to this part. In this mini-boss fight, you have to aim your mouse while your opponent is moving around while also keeping your hand as close to your gun as possible. Then, as soon as you hear your opponent draw their gun, you have to draw yours and shoot them before they shoot you in this quick draw duel, kind of like in the first Red Dead Redemption game. The only problem was, I couldn't get past this guy. Maybe it was the wonky keyboard controls, maybe because there were too few chances to practice this minigame, and maybe it was a certified skill issue moment. But the matter of fact was, I spent around 30 minutes resetting, adjusting my strategy, looking up a few guides, and I just couldn't beat it. And since this is an essential part of the game, you can't just skip it somehow. So since I was really frustrated and all I wanted to do after a long day was to enjoy myself with some gaming, I just stopped playing and moved on to something else. I mean, there's so many games on my backlog, I don't see why I should waste any more time stuck in this one section that was gatekeeping me from enjoying the rest of the game, when I can just play something else that was potentially more fun. Now, I'm not making this video to say that Call of Juarez is a bad game. Quite the contrary. It's praised to be a classic shooter set in the Wild West period. It's just that a roadblock that I have no way of overcoming is preventing me to make progress, which meant that I couldn't enjoy the rest of the game. Now, I went back later and figured out that you have to use this dodge mechanic to try and dodge the enemy bullets, as it's borderline essential to mastering before going forward. But it was a long day, I just wanted to have some fun, and I wasn't willing to tough it out. So this whole experience got me thinking, was I correct in my decision to stop playing a game because I couldn't get past a section that required a particular skill/mechanic? Would it have been better for me to just grit it out and keep trying, even if it might have taken me hours or days just on that one part? And that transitions into the topic of today's discussion. And I'll start by asking you a question. What was the last game you quit playing? And what was the reason that you quit? Was it because you got frustrated with a portion of the game due to its mechanics? Was it because you were lost and had no idea where to start or go next due to lack of directions? Was it because of a technical difficulty where you couldn't get the game working properly or couldn't get it working the way you wanted? All of these tie into one of the videos that resonated with me last year, The Quit Moment by Josh Strive Hayes. The reason why games lose players. Now, this video will differ from that a little, since player retention is much more important in live service games or MMOs, but it's something present in single-player games as well. In an age where games are so accessible, with constant online sales and Epic Games literally giving away $60 games for free, we have so many choices when it comes to what games to play. And as developers, you would of course want as many people to play and finish your game. You have incentives to try and retain players through the gameplay, where every second of annoyance, unclear instructions, or technical difficulties can potentially lead to a player just giving up and moving on to the next game on their backlog. You can probably see where I'm going with this, but there is also philosophy in game design that makes this problem more apparent. If you watch my Let It Die video, I talked about vertical and horizontal progression in games. Horizontal progression comes when you improve mechanically at the game, whether it's mastering the dodge roll in Elden Ring, learning how elements interact with one another, landing those perfect parries. It's a testament to your skills as a player, and it's much harder to quantify than the other type of progression. Progressing vertically, on the other hand, comes from directly upgrading or leveling something with a numerical value, gaining plus 10 health, plus 1 to dexterity, plus 20% attack on your weapon, getting the ability to dodge twice in a row, or being able to revive on the spot. Vertical progression is where it's not about your skills, but it's about making numbers bigger. Now, before you form any biases in your head about how horizontal progression is better since it actually tests your skills as a player rather than an arbitrary stat increase, something I failed to realize in my Let It Die video is that there are positives to both sides. So let me try defending vertical progression. Let's say you're playing a turn-based RPG, and when you enter a boss fight, that boss will hit you for 500 hit points when you start. This means if your health total is not above 500, you will instantly lose and unable to start the fight. But if you go somewhere else, train, level up, and get enough hit points to stand a chance, you come back and you can actually beat it. This is mostly the experience I had when playing Yakuza 7 during the Majima fight. There is still a sense of progression. Sure, it's just the HP stat increase at the end of the day, but before you weren't strong enough, now you are, and it feels good to be stronger. You can think of these moments as a stat check, where you win or gain an advantage by having high enough stats. Now, what about any negatives with horizontal progression? Well, assuming that there's nothing the player can do to increase their stats, the only thing standing between you and victory is your mastery of the game mechanics. An example of this might be the Chainsaw Dog boss from Metal Gear Rising, where the fight becomes a lot more tolerable when you master the game's parry mechanic. This thing killed me so many times when I played it, since the parry system was a little different in how it works compared to some other games. But eventually, I won. It was a skill check through and through. The game is basically saying, learn this game mechanic or you don't get to continue the game. If you've been on this channel for a while, another form of purely horizontal progression in games comes from roguelikes. Keep in mind, it's specifically roguelikes and not roguelites. There's a Game Maker's Toolkit video on this, but essentially, the difficulty of the game is always the same throughout. It's expected that you become more skilled as you play, meaning eventually you will break through the skill barrier and beat the game. However, a problem with this approach is that players that just aren't used to a certain style of gameplay or can't improve fast enough for whatever reason will never be able to beat the game. This can be a hefty demerit in today's gaming scene, where you really want as many people to give your game a shot amidst all the competition out there, and not potentially drive some people away. This is probably the reason that most games today offer both types of progression. Sure, you can just upgrade your health or attack stat, but there's still some mechanics in place that encourage you to be better. Even gacha games like Genshin have skill-based components, like team building, rotations, and learning iframes. Well, let's say that a game needs to have its progression as purely or primarily horizontal. So what would happen if a player actually just gets stuck? When you can't beat a stage in some games, a pop-up will remind you that you can turn down the difficulty, just in case you get annoyed that you can't make progress in the current difficulty and quit the game. The latest God of War title, when it first released, had the characters constantly give you hints to solve the puzzles. This has something to do with player retention, because they really don't want you to feel stuck and potentially quitting the game. Game devs craft their beautifully realized worlds and storylines, and they, of course, will want all players to get the full experience. So while some people may think their skills are being undermined when a game nudges them to turn down the difficulty, I actually think it's good game design, as the pop-up is usually optional and it provides you with more options in case you're stuck, and you can always opt out of this if you wish. Some games are more subtle about it. Say you stumbled across Margit in Elden Ring unprepared. You get your ass handed to you and you can't progress. Well, you don't need to be here. There's a whole world out there waiting to be explored. Go somewhere else, level up your vigor, get some new weapons, upgrade them, and come back when you're stronger. Sure, it's possible to masterfully dodge your way to victory when underleveled, but the game prides itself by giving you options. You can just overlevel and have a way easier time with Margit. There's no rule in the game where you have to be at a certain point at a certain time. But let's say a game doesn't have these accessibility features. What if they just demand a certain level of mastery of the game mechanics and there's nothing you can do to lower the difficulty? Now by this point you might be retorting with a classic skill issue argument. If you can't beat it, just don't play the game. It's clearly not made for you. Now for the record, I actually kinda agree with this, as elitist as it may sound. Not everything is made for everyone. Some people love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, while I've never seen a Marvel movie that's not the Avengers. Some games are targeted towards a specific audience where some people might not enjoy it, and that's okay. And this would have been where I ended the video. But something has changed in the recent gaming industry. Competition. Namely, the competition of getting your game seen by as many people as possible. Like what I said in the beginning of the video, gamers have as many choices in games as possible. The smallest bump in the road to make a player frustrated can contribute to them quitting the game. When you're an independent indie dev, wanting to get your game out there, or a AAA company needing to please shareholders with sales, it's paramount that as many players play your game as possible for as long as possible. Why would it ever be advantageous for a general sentiment to be going around where people are saying, I gave up on this game midway because of reason X. When you put up sections of a game where you can't progress unless the player demonstrates a high amount of skill, you are decreasing the likelihood that more players will get exposed to your game. Due to this, what ends up happening is that since the gaming industry is so massive, what makes the most sense is to design a game that caters to the widest audience possible, even if it means upsetting the hardcore players. Alternatively, giving players that are unable to progress the opportunity to make it easier, like LA Noir asking you if you would like to skip a section if you failed too many times, or unlocking easy mode in Devil May Cry 3 if you die too many times. The bottom line is, requiring too much skill-based mechanics in games can lead to players quitting the game, and the game not being as popular or successful, versus if the game had accessibility features in place that could bypass those problems. If you're a fan of any said game, why wouldn't you want more people to enjoy the same game as you? How is it ever a good thing if newcomers are drawn away and your fanbase dwindles in numbers? So the next time you find yourself frustrated with a particular game, wondering why you're not making progress or stuck in a particular area, maybe, and just maybe, it is the game's fault. Maybe they could have done something to make the experience easier. And there's nothing wrong with that.
That man was faster than greased lightning, and now he was at my mercy.
Huh, I did it.